Norwich University of the Arts is a small specialist university spread across 10 buildings in the city of Norwich in the east of the UK. Last year we were ranked as the #2 design education institution in the world by the World Brand Design Society, and we have little under 3,000 undergraduate, postgraduate and research students. As a relatively small institution, we were able to respond quickly and flexibly to the UK lockdown in March 2020. However, the inherent nature of our courses caused many challenges. Art and design courses deal with materials, with physical processes and practical skills, and are often delivered in specialist workshops with industry standard equipment. This presentation looks at our institutional response in relation to teaching and learning, particularly the problematic question of how we can adapt practical and material disciplines to a predominantly digital delivery. I'm going to focus on the period from March to December 2020, covering the summer and then the autumn term up to Christmas. But I will say little about the national lockdown at the start of 2021 as well. All of our undergraduate courses share a common curriculum framework, which is divided into 3 areas, as you can see here: creative practice, research and communication, careers and employability. Shared learning outcomes are then interpreted by each course in ways that reflect and adapt to the discourses of each particular discipline. In general, courses are taught holistically through projects which are modelled on the kinds of practices found in each industry. These are supported with the usual range of tutorials, seminars and lectures, but also through practical workshops, specific hands-on training in using specialist equipment, and live projects with external partners, including local galleries and creative businesses. The necessary closure of our studios and workshops, along with galleries and other spaces in our community, presented obvious problems. Just to give a few examples, students would normally be using film studios, textile printing workshops, 3D printers, bronze casting workshops. The timing of the national lockdown was in many ways quite fortuitous. We were just a few weeks away from the point when our studios are normally emptied to accommodate the degree shows in the summer. Over the summer, a small working group of senior managers and academics, including myself, made some key decisions about the year to come. Lectures, tutorials and group sessions would all happen online. Timetables were rewritten to put smaller groups into larger rooms, and crucially, every student would receive 1 day a week of on-campus teaching. Engagement and a sense of belonging were important, but also the key need to work hands-on with materials. The immediate problem was our traditional end-of-year degree shows, which would normally take over a huge amount of space, attract many thousands of visitors, and act as one of our key marketing events of the year. These were all turned into an online showcase. Although the undergraduate courses had nearly finished the year, our master's programmes run to a different schedule. Back in the early summer, we weren't allowed to use the buildings at all, and just couldn't give the students the kind of workshop access that they needed to make a final body of work for their degree shows. Apart from a handful of international students who needed to stick to their schedule, we moved the final projects unit for all of our master's programmes to the autumn, when we anticipated that workshop access would be more possible. However, back in April, our part-time master's students were about to start a more experimental research-based unit, and we continued with that unit entirely online. This turned out to be a really useful experiment which taught us lots of lessons that we could bring to the planning of undergraduate teaching in the autumn. The first lesson was technological. Someone from our IT department remarked that they'd been trying for years to get staff to use Office 365. We were all at home using it within about a week, and I've heard a similar story from lots of different institutions. The second lesson was psychological. Teaching the experimental master's unit online, asking students to come up with creative solutions to working in lockdown from their homes. We learned that it was completely possible. I was teaching a group of 8 students myself at this point. There was one who made low-tech woodcut prints and collage using a homemade printing press from materials that she found at home. Another was using lasers bought from the internet and free software to explore 3D imagery. He was doing all this amazing work from his home, where he was self-isolating. One of our curation students was planning an outdoor exhibition of large-scale artworks made directly onto the pavements. We'd learnt this psychological lesson that it was possible. The third lesson was that working within a learning outcomes-based structure Many of these can be fulfilled without practical work or can be addressed in alternative ways. For those not familiar with how art and design is taught, I'll briefly explain. We don't judge a student's work on aesthetic criteria. No one says, that's a masterpiece, well done, you get a first. We have between 4 and 6 learning outcomes for each unit which align with the elements of the curriculum I mentioned earlier. The student's work is marked holistically, so that any part of their submission can, in theory, evidence the fulfilment of any of the learning outcomes. In normal circumstances, the body of practical work is accompanied by a portfolio of supporting work and evidence. Things like sketchbooks, research, work in progress, that kind of thing. Now what happened was that this supporting work took on a much greater importance in relation to the body of practical work. After an intense and stressful summer, our course teams had rewritten all the undergraduate timetables, and we were ready to bring 2,500 students into the buildings for 1 day a week each, with all seminars, lectures and tutorials delivered through Microsoft Teams. Our estates teams had increased our computer workshop capacity, installed perspex screens in offices and moved furniture to facilitate social distancing, and we were fully equipped with visors, hand sanitisers and wipes. There were systems in place to clean delicate equipment like cameras between uses. There had also been significant investment in software, and all students had access to Adobe Creative Cloud and Microsoft 365 from their homes. Our library had set up a click and collect service, and our art materials shop offered postal delivery. We instigated limited individual online bookings for our workshops. But what about the practical, physical making? Even with a day a week on campus, we were aware that our staff and our students would need to be finding ways to develop a material practice in the space of their own accommodation. Our continuing students would need to strengthen their skills and to bring things up to a degree show standard. And perhaps more challengingly, our new intake would need to be building up those new competencies from scratch. This is the heart of my paper today. I'm going to describe some of the projects and strategies that our staff developed in order to facilitate practical art and design work that can be undertaken under these extraordinary circumstances. In those early weeks using Teams, we quickly worked out that it was easy to share screens, and so students could continue to share their work and their sketchbooks. A lot of work is produced digitally anyway, and our students are already used to scanning or photographing their artwork for portfolios and for submission. We started to do simple things like working on collaborative documents and viewing websites together by sharing the lecturer's screen. We invested in a license for Padlet to enable us to do more visual collaborations than our existing VLE allowed. Students could post up work to get feedback from each other, contribute anonymously if necessary, and staff created very visually rich spaces. In many ways, there was very little difference between the experience of talking about artwork on screen and gathering in a studio space to peer at a piece of paper taped to the wall. The idea was to recreate the messy experience of seeing each other's work in the studios. This is the kind of collaborative work that these applications were designed for. And despite our worry that we would perhaps lose some of the materiality of real life, it worked very well. We were also getting used to managing large groups of students online. An early project with Year Zero students asked them to split up into breakout rooms where they could chat while working on physical collages of magazine images at home. They were brought back together for plenary discussions after an hour or so, at which point they shared their work before going back into groups to develop their collages further. This rhythm of receiving input from the lecturer and then going off to work independently on something and then coming back for more formative feedback and then working independently again was one answer to the challenge of digital teaching. There was enough time to develop something independently over the course of a morning, but the students also felt supported and in touch with each other. It wasn't hybrid teaching in the sense that in-person and distance delivery were mixed. It was a hybrid of taught and independent at-home work. Under the strict lockdown conditions that we experienced from April to June 2020, this seemed to offer a sense of being part of the university and of belonging to a recognisable cohort. Sharing images like this on a screen is okay, but one of the big threshold concepts that we want our students to get is the significance of scale. How a large painting has a different physical impact to a small painting. A bit of cheap software called Kunstmatrix 3D allowed us to put student work into virtual galleries in a way that replicates the real scale of each piece. This also allowed us to play with curation and set up several complete exhibitions that could easily be walked around in 3D. Instead of having a group of students simply looking at each other's work as a set of JPEGs of the same size, or whatever the size of your screen is, their work was put into the virtual gallery in advance at the correct scale, and they were invited to explore the space individually before a group tutorial. It wasn't the same as hanging physical works in one of our real project spaces at NUA, but it went some way to reproducing the relationship between artworks in an exhibition, and it created a bit of excitement about showing the work, which was really important. Some staff also used synchronous sessions to demonstrate processes from their own home that the students could follow. For instance, a second-year painting workshop was based on producing a certain kind of emulsion using egg yolk that's used in oil painting. This was demonstrated live from the lecturer's kitchen table. And in fact, it offered better visibility and access in many ways than having a large group of students gathering around a small table in a studio in real life. There were the same opportunities to talk and to ask questions, but with the extra possibilities of zooming in with the camera for a close-up view. Our technicians already provided many inductions into particular pieces of equipment through pre-recorded videos, and these were expanded and added to over the summer to increase the range of what was available. Once again, a positive side effect of these was accessibility. They could be watched anywhere at any time, paused, repeated and replayed as much as the student wanted. I think that as an institution we already knew that there were benefits to putting so much information online, but the extraordinary circumstances forced us all to get over any residual attachment to in-person delivery as a default. We saw that from the student's point of view, live was not always better. On our fashion course, another approach to live materiality was used. Rather than setting a task or demonstrating a process, here the students worked together through their screens to analyse the construction of a particular garment, a tailored shirt. They had been asked to attend the lesson with a tailored shirt of some sort to hand. The aim was to understand the way that a shirt is built up of many smaller pieces and to learn some of that vocabulary. The lecturer guided them in examining different areas of the garment, the sleeves, the collar, the back, and so on. Students were asked to look really closely at the construction and to count how many pieces went into the final piece. At the same time, the lecturer explained the technical names for each of the pieces and their role. What was particularly nice about this idea went beyond the specifics of the subject matter. The fact that everyone taking part was sitting at home with their hands busy exploring a garment brought them together through a shared sensory experience. As you felt the fabric, you could see and hear others in the group doing the same. There was a sense of material connection through the screen. A similar but slightly more elaborate workshop took place within fine arts. Participants were mailed a sculpture kit in advance with some basic materials to work with, including a plastic bag of plaster of Paris. This is normally used in our 3D workshops, where the dust and the hardened plaster usually make a hell of a mess. We couldn't ask people to do that at home, so the idea was that they carefully add an amount of water to the plaster in the bag and mix it up. The whole bag full of wet plaster could then be pressed into or wrapped around an object and left to set hard without creating any mess at all. This was a neat way of giving people a contained and manageable experience of casting at home. Once again, the students had not only real physical engagement with materials and the casting process, but also the shared sense of doing something together at the same time. These simultaneous experiences were the crucial element. The sense of co-presence that they create, it might be an illusion, but the feelings of sharing and the feelings of belonging to a group are real. Our new BA in acting presented its own unique challenges, since so much of the practice revolves around fostering a sense of presence and embodiment. Students are learning how to use their bodies as a medium, doing things like yoga and vocal exercises through online tutorials, and learning to work in relation to each other. For digital sessions, students are asked to first spend a little time creating a clear working space at home, moving furniture to the side, creating a sense of special focus. That simple ritual meant that their engagement with the lecturer and with the work became more conscious. There's a clear division between work and normal life in student accommodation. Another imaginative solution for on-campus activity was to create exercises for pairs of students kept at a distance from each other with a long wooden stick. When we were thinking about the return to campus last summer, One of the issues we talked about was a need to allow students to process their pandemic anxieties and how we could actually do this through some of the work that we set them. This workshop, with a long stick, made social distancing into something that could be worked with as subject matter. It made it productive. So this is the kind of deliveries our students have received since September. Being practical courses, they have been allowed into campus to a limited degree. And that single day each week has gone a long way to maintaining a sense of community and a sense of engagement. In common with many others in the sector, we noted that digital delivery suited some people well. Anxious or shy students sometimes seemed happier to contribute online when they could type rather than speak in a group and keep their cameras off. People with mobility issues or caring responsibilities appreciated not having to travel in every day. I've heard several lecturers comment that our games, art and design students hardly noticed the lockdown at all, since they generally work entirely digitally anyway, and most have powerful computer systems at home already. Everyone also benefited from the ease of bringing in international guest speakers, who didn't need to travel, and the routine recording of lectures has been helpful for anyone with special access needs. The various restrictions of the pandemic also removed a lot of social distractions, and in fact we noted that the final projects submitted in May were very strong. When our postgraduates submitted their delayed master's projects in December, we again saw a slight rise in attainment overall. Our speculation is that this was because there was little else to do in the preceding months other than get on with some work. As a final note, I'll just say a word about the third national lockdown at the start of 2021. During this period, our students weren't receiving on-campus teaching at all for roughly 10 weeks. And I think everyone was feeling quite demoralised at going into another national lockdown. We started to notice a drop in engagement by February, with a gap opening up between those who were active and a few who became more invisible. We already run a series of social and community building events at this time of year called Winterfest, which is meant to boost morale after an assessment point, and we tried to shift a lot of that online. But more than anything, I think this showed to us the crucial importance to our students of maintaining some kind of regular contact with the buildings and with each other in person, even just one day a week. That touch point enabled us to move everything else to digital with very little noticeable effect on outcomes, at least in the short term. In the long term, of course, we, like everyone else, hope to be getting back to real-world teaching. We've all learnt a lot from the emergency shift to digital, and we plan to keep the best parts of that as we move forwards. We're thinking of this mixture of on-campus and digital provision as an expanded learning environment that gives us the chance to make the most of the particular qualities of each type of experience we design for our students. Our students already move seamlessly between these worlds in their daily lives. Perhaps finally, we're beginning to catch up with them.